So nice to be here with you. Thank you all for coming. So my name is Yaroslav. I'm from Ukraine. You might know me from my blog or from my Super Rails YouTube channel, where I post a lot of stuff about Ruby, Rails, and especially about Hotwire. So I originate from Ukraine, from the north of Ukraine. So right now it is liberated. So that is Kiev, Chernobyl, and Chernigiv. So I used to live 80 kilometers away from Chernobyl, great place. Yeah, and that is my family's home. So it got bombed in one of the first days of war. That is my godfather. He went to defend Ukraine. And I mean, we are here at such a beautiful venue, but there is the war going on. And like just today, the city of Kharkiv was randomly bombed by the Russians. And there are many Ruby Rails people from Ukraine. Some of them are actually fighting. This is Verok. He contributed to Ruby, and he's actually defending Ukraine right now. But on a positive note, I just recently became a father, so yeah. It is just 2.5 months ago in France, and today we are going to talk about Hotwire. So we already had a nice talk by Jorge about Turbo 8, so he was talking about the future. We had Marco, who was talking about these so many tools in the Hotwire ecosystem, and I really imagine Marco as like, yeah, he's kind of bringing all the stuff to the table, and I'm doing the cooking. So, yeah. Therefore, the Hotwire Cookbook. I've actually got a cookbook. Yeah, last week I was in Romania, and I was given this beautiful cookbook, and I was preparing the Hotwire Cookbook presentation mostly while being in Romania. So, yeah, a Hotwire Cookbook. Yeah, and I've done a lot of videos about different parts of Hotwire, Stimulus, TurboFrames, TurboStreams. Feel free to check them out on the YouTube channel. There is the Just Enough Hotwire for Rails Developers series. Actually, just enough of something for developers seems to be a buzzword these days. I think Joe Mazzotti also has like just enough Turbo Native, and so it goes. So yeah, the Hotwire Cookbook. I'm going to teach you or like show you a few common recipes, the most simple things you can build with different parts of Hotwire. So we're going to talk about TurboDrive, TurboFrames, TurboStreams, and Stimulus. Now, while talking to many people in the lobby, a few people, well, many people were saying, oh, I identify as a backend developer, like I'm a Rails backend developer. And many people seem to have heard about Hotwire, and some have tried it. So can you please see the hands of those who have not tried Hotwire yet? Okay, so I think I will be primarily targeting you with these very simple recipes, and I'll try to make it quite smooth and help you understand how to do basic things with Hotwire. So we're going to start with TurboDrive. Now, they said that TurboLinks is dead, but really for me, I imagine TurboDrive as the combination of TurboLinks and Rails.js. So for many years, I just had gem TurboLinks in my gem file. Often I would disable it. I had Rails.js. I never thought of why do I have it in the gem file, but I kept it there. And now we don't need those two gems. We have just gem turbo Rails that does a lot of different stuff. So what does TurboDrive do? And what features can you explicitly use with TurboDrive? So previously on Rails 6 and previous versions, you could make link to with a non-get request. Then Rails.js was depreciated, so it isn't like anymore in the default stack, you couldn't do it. But now you can use link to with data turbo method delete, so turbo does it, and you can still use link to, but with slightly different method to make non-get requests. And again, always I would suggest using a button to if it's not a get request. Then there is turbo confirm. So previously in the versions that use Rails.js, you could do this like, are you sure, or another browser message, then you click some button. So previously you would do it with data confirm, now you would do it with data turbo confirm. So it is an easy migration from previous versions of Ruby on Rails if you want to move to Rails 7 from previous versions. Also, you had this thing that disable on submit. So you see, I clicked submit, and I cannot click it again. Here is a bigger version so that you can see it. And previously, you would do it with disable with. Now, you do it with turbo submits with. And another one of my favorite features of TurboDrive is sticker elements across pages. So here in this demo, I click a video, I click an audio, I go from one page to another, and these elements are persisted across the pages. So it is done with just a tiny bit of code. Each element that should be permanent should have a unique ID, and you should add data to be permanent true, and it works like magic. If you go to different podcasts, or if you go to different Spotify-like apps, you will see similar behaviors. So here, for example, on the 37 Signals podcast, I click play, I navigate different pages, and you see that the player keeps playing. And they are also using data to be permanent under the hood. So you can just go to the inspector and see how it works. Another example of using data to be permanent would be on my SuperRails website, where I have search. So I've got a modal, I search for something, I go to a next page, and if you open the modal again, the previous results were saved. They're not saved anywhere except the HTML. So sometimes HTML is all you need to save some results. Sometimes you still would need to disable Turbo. So previously, when the device was not yet compatible with Turbo, you would add the data turbo false to device. In some cases, when you make a post request and afterwards from the controller you would be redirecting, or on a sign-out link, you would also sometimes need to use turbo false. So don't think that it is hacky. In some particular cases, it is what you need. Next, we're going to talk about TurboFrames. So for me, TurboFrames have two main features. First of all, lazy loading and self-contained page elements. We're going to talk about each of them. So lazy loading. Here I have a collection of employee records. So I just open the employee page, and the records keep loading. And as I scroll lower, new records keep getting loaded. So this can really increase the speed of your initial page load. And under the hood, it works like this. So it is a default scaffold, and I have a TurboFrame tag around each record. I add loading lazy, and if you add loading lazy, an element will be loaded only when it becomes visible on the page. And it makes a request to the show page, and in the show page, I have a TurboFrame with the same ID as this. So it loads that element. Another example of lazy loading would be, for example, on Basecamp website. So I click on my avatar, and you see it actually makes a request, and here it is. So it wasn't initially loaded, it loads only when I need to load it. So I would say it is like load on click. So an element becomes visible, and then you load it. Here is a simplified example. I have a list of employee names, and I would like to load the details of each of the employees when I click on the name. So it would work like this. I click on the employee, you see I make requests, and these records get loaded. So if you have a lot of data on the page, you might want to use this kind of lazy loading. It works in a very similar manner as the previous example, but here I have the HTML details tag. So when I unhide the element, the loading lazy occurs, and I make the request to the show action and render the page. Another example is hover cards. So on Twitter, for example, I hover on a profile, and I can see the profile details. And you don't want to load all the profiles because it could consume some memory. So another example would be on the GitHub, again, hover cards. And here's an example on a new Rails app. So I would just hover on the details, and you see it makes a request and loads the details for each record. And the way to do it is very similar. But here, to unhide the elements, I'm just using some CSS. And you see, in some cases, you don't need the JavaScript. You can just do a tiny bit of CSS to unhide an element on hover. Another important feature of TurboFrames is self-contained page elements. So one of the best examples, in my opinion, is searching and filtering a table. This is usually quite a complex thing to do. So here I have a search field. I start typing, and you see with each thing I type, I make a new request, and I refresh the table that is visible. And you see the URL also gets updated. How does it work? So I just installed Ransec for the search, and I did the regular search you would do without Turbo. So usually we would have like a search field and a submit button. But in my case, I added a TurboFrame employees list to the search form, and I wrapped the table into the TurboFrame tag. So I'm making the request to the index action, but the controller knows that it should update only this TurboFrame tag if it finds it on the page. And I'm also using Turbo Action Advanced to update the URL automatically. Also, you might have noticed that I have syntax highlighting of the results, and it is done very easily by a thing that has existed for many years in Rails, by the highlight tag. Yeah, so let's go further. We've done search. Now let's do sort. So here I added, again, with the Ransec sort links, and I can sort. But you see, now when I'm sorting, the URL doesn't get updated. To update the URL when also sorting, I will add the Turbo Action Advanced inside this TurboFrame. So whenever I do some kind of redirect, some kind of request, a GET request from inside the TurboFrame, it is going to update the URL accordingly. Yeah, so Turbo Action Advanced. Now, let's see. I will try to navigate outside of the frame. So I will try to click the show on one of the employees, and it doesn't work. You see, we get this content missing thing. Why do we get it? Let's go to the browser console. So you see, I make the show request, and in the network tab, we see that we actually had a successful response, but for some reason, we didn't update the page. And if we go to the console tab, we see that we made a request to the employee show page, but the show page did not have a TurboFrame with employees list. So in this case, we will want to add target top on this TurboFrame, and this way all the requests that are going outside of the page would be a full page to redirect. So now I click show, and it does a full page redirect with adding this target top. Next, I really love this example, inline editing. So I have a giant list of employees. Imagine you're building something like an Excel table in your application, and you click on the name or surname or any attribute, and you can update it inline. So you see, I go and make a request to the edit page, I make a request to update it, and the data gets updated. How does it work? It's a bit more complex, so I won't be going very deep, but basically I'm wrapping each attribute into a separate TurboFrame tag, and it makes a request to the edit page, and it updates only the attribute that is wrapped. So you see each, the form is wrapped in a TurboFrame, and I render only the attribute that matches the one in the request params. Yeah, when I was approximately at this slide, I thought, okay, it's like going too deep. This should have been a workshop. You can just go to my GitHub and go to Hotwire Cookbook, and you'll see a bunch of these examples that you can try on your local machine or try to reproduce. Another beautiful example is chain select. Like you select country, then state, then city. A few years ago, I worked at a company, and when I joined, they were using React just for like chain select. So they had like Bootstrap, some Stimulus, but they were using React just for a page with chain select. And nowadays you can easily do it with just using TurboFrames. The trick here is that I submit the form without to a different URL. So you see I have a form button that submits without doing the update action, and I just refresh the form with the submitted params. So there are a few tricks, and you can learn more about these specific details, again, on the SuperRails YouTube channel, where there are videos about each of these approaches. Yeah, another beautiful example is modals. So in this case, we want to edit an employee. You see, I click new employee. I can get the errors rendered. I can go and try to edit one of the employees and see his attributes there. So in the case of the modals, most importantly, on the link to, for example, new employee, I add data TurboFrame modal. So it would go to the new action. Here I have the new action. It is wrapped into the TurboFrame modal, and I also have the TurboFrame tag modal in my application layout, so that there is a placeholder, like an element with an ID, that can always be replaced. And well, what kind of modal is it without a tiny bit of styling? And just in case, when using modals, another thing I really like to do is add like a redirect to back or somewhere if it is not a TurboFrame request. Otherwise, you will try to go to the employee's new page, and the modal will be rendered, and everything else will be empty, and it won't look great. And yeah, going back to TurboFrames, really when I was starting to prepare the talk, I was thinking, okay, TurboFrames really feels that like the hardest thing, like it's the hardest to make examples for and the hardest to wrap my head around. But there are quite a lot of things you can do with it. So a few things I would suggest if you like identify yourself as a backend developer and you want to learn some Hotwire, some Turbo. So you will start using the browser network tab to see the Turbo requests that are incoming. You will sometimes have to use the console tab for stimulus and for debugging. DOM ID, so you will need to give IDs to the parts of the page or the records that you want to replace. You will start using data attributes, different stuff like on change, on click. And another thing I really recommend is better understanding how forms are how HTML forms work. So like you can have different submit buttons within one form. You can have attributes that are not within the form in HTML, but submit to a specific form. So it will also help you a lot. And go next to TurboStreams. So this, I think, might be one of the easiest things. So for me, TurboStreams is basically rebranded js.erb. Yeah, remember, like previously we had this format JS, and in like a JS ERB file, we would find an element with an ID and replace it with a partial or with some HTML or with something else. And with the TurboStreams, again, instead of format JS, we have format TurboStream, and we have a few actions. So update, replace, add on top, add on the bottom, and remove an element. And an example would be again with modals. So previously with TurboFrames, we were rendering modals, rendering errors, but now we want to also update the list of employees. So I'm going to try to submit the record, and you see the employee has been added to the list. I'm going to rename the employee, and you see, again, there was a request to update this record. And it would look something like this. So in the update and create actions, I would add format TurboStream, so that the controller knows that we are going to try to respond with TurboStream. And I created that create TurboStream and update TurboStream templates where I will prepend, so add on top of the list. Or in case of updating, I'm going to replace the element with the ID like employee 17 with a refreshed option of it. Another example, just removing elements from a list. So here I'm just clicking delete, and you see I have a request and the employee disappears from the list. So again, absolutely the same approach, but here I'm using TurboStream remove employee. And by remove employee, it is looking for an element with employee underscore 17 or whatever the ID of the employee is. So you should be sure to wrap these elements that you display on your index page, each of them into a div with the ID of this element. Another example is sending a few TurboStreams. So here you see I'm removing the element from the list and also updating the count of employees. And you see I am also looking at the network tab, and yeah, in the response you can see that there were 2 TurboStream actions. So you see I'm adding 2 TurboStreams in the destroy TurboStream ERB. One to remove the employee, and the second to update the counter. Another common thing would be to just like update flash. In this case, I'm not replacing the flash message, but I'm adding multiple flash messages on the page. And a cool thing, actually, I learned this just recently. So for common stuff that you might have on many pages, instead of adding the TurboStream append flash inside the destroy template, for example, or inside the controller, you can just have application TurboStream ERB, where you would be always replacing flash, and you would not have to duplicate this update flash in each of your controller actions. Another example where you would use both TurboStreams and TurboFrames together is infinite pagination. So here is an example of my Instagram where I'm scrolling down and you see I have new network requests and I get next pages of the results. And here in the index page, when it is loaded, I have a TurboFrame and an empty div with a list of posts. And so I'm trying to respond with the former TurboStream, again the index page, and in former TurboStream I am showing a list of posts and replacing this TurboFrame. So this is a very interesting example of how you can combine TurboStreams and frames and achieve much, much more. Next, TurboStream broadcasts. So I really try to differentiate TurboStreams and TurboStream broadcasts. The ones that are via just HTTP, you send a request, you receive a response, and the one with changes that can happen without your specific action. So I would say that, well, TurboStream broadcasts use WebSockets, use Action Cable. I think you was just watching the Action Cable talk, and JS ERB. The rebranded JS ERB. So you listen to some changes and you add on top or replace or remove or something. So a simple example of something you could build with TurboStream broadcasts is like a live chat as on YouTube or live messages. So here I have like 2 message windows in Facebook and I can be messaging in both of them at the same time and I don't need any page refreshers. Here's a simple example. I have 2 browser tabs open, and you see I have this TurboStream channel is streaming from global channel, and in my console, I'm going to make a few TurboStream requests. So you see, I'm making a request to the global channel, and both windows are listening to this global channel, and I'm saying to update it with time zone now. And in both windows, I'm not refreshing them, but the time gets updated. And I'm using this command, so I have a stream from global channel, I have a div with ID my element, and I'm just replacing the HTML within this div with time zone now. Other things you can build with like TurboStream broadcasts, very simple ones, are like how many people are there visiting the website at the moment, how many people are at this specific page. You can see these behaviors at Booking, at Google Docs, at YouTube. And here's an example doing it in a brand new Rails app. So here I have one browser and here another. You see I have 2 visitors in the app. I go to the same room as this room and there are 2 people. I close the tab and there is again 1 person in the app. So it works and it's really easy to do. And a few like most common broadcast listeners that I would define and that I add to most of my apps is stream from current user in the application file. So whenever you want to send a specific update to the user, no matter what page he is in, you would send it to like this specific user. Then like global notifications, like some kind of update. For example, you go to Agency of Learning Rails World website, you get these like live updates that you have a new session coming. I think they're using TurboStream broadcast for that. And specific like to a chat room or chat room and current user if you want to be even more specific, like only this person in this chat room. And in many examples for how to use TurboStream broadcast, you would see like broadcasting from a modal. So here are a few. In each of this example, like it is less and less abstraction. So this is what you would see in like the most basic tutorials. And here I try to like go and decompose it a bit more and a bit more. So I really don't like this. I don't like using this kind of callbacks. I like to be more explicit from my controllers. And I also prefer using TurboStream channels, broadcast update 2, whenever I can instead of doing it from the modal. So going to the last part, Stimulus. Actually like Stimulus a lot. I always identified as a Ruby Rails developer, not as a JavaScript person. I always hated the jQuery. I tried to stay away from React, and Stimulus just like fit my head, my mindset well. So thanks to Stimulus, we don't need to disable Turbo or Turbo links when loading JavaScript anymore. We don't need to use jQuery. I've actually worked on projects where I am removing jQuery and replacing it with Stimulus, and it works perfectly. You don't need to have inline scripts. A much better approach is to have Stimulus. And yeah, let's see a few examples. So talking of stimulus, yesterday DHH and I think also Jorge were both shown the Basecamp Kanban as different examples of live interactions you can do and how you can use Hotwire. And when I saw this, I thought, okay, they must have seen my video about like how to add drag and drop. So cool, Basecamp watches my videos and they create good products, yeah. So here's an example of doing like the same Kanban board if you want to recreate Basecamp with a new Rails application. Here I have a list of lists and tasks within the list. So I will be moving one task from another. For this, you can just use a library like SortableJS, but the main trick is in actually updating the records in your database. So here I'm using SortableJS, as you see, and also I'm using RequestJS. So RequestJS is a perfect tool to make requests to your controller actions from inside your stimulus controllers. So here I'm using sortable to be able to sort, and then I'm making a request using RequestJS to update the record in the database so that when I refresh the page, all my work doesn't go unnoticed. Another example would be, again, data tables. So previously we did data tables with sending requests to the server again and again. But if you have just one page of results, sometimes you might not need to actually add TurboFrames to make requests on the server. You can just do it like with JavaScript, like many of you would by default. So here is an example of doing it with the JavaScript. I just added a stimulus controller. This is what I came up with for searching and for sorting. And here I just plug in the controller. I say that I want to sort by first name and last name and search by first name and last name. And it works. So I would say if you have one page of results, it kind of makes sense to use stimulus, regular JavaScript. If you have multiple pages of results and you need to make requests to the server, obviously TurboFrames. Another example of using StimulusJS would be to import external libraries. So as an example, we are going to import Slim Select that allows you to select multiple options or search within your select box. And this library uses both JS and CSS. So first of all, I'm going to import map pin Slim Select. I'm going to create a Slim controller. In the Slim controller, I'm going to initialize Slim Select. I'm going to add it to my form element. So you see data controller Slim. And I don't need to define a target in this case because I'm saying this element, and this element is the form select, so it will work. And for the JavaScript, so if you're using input maps, maybe the easiest way would be just to import the URL to the CDN in application CSS. And here is how it would work with this code that I just provided. So you see I have this country search. I can select one of the options. I can start typing, and it will autofill the country I want to select. Yeah, another example, maybe one of the first things I want to do when I add device is like hide this flash. Like I don't want this flash to be just hidden on my page. So I would want to auto-hide it, and this is an example of a stimulus controller that I would be adding to all my apps where I can hide a flash message by either clicking on the flash message or on a cross, or automatically hide it after a certain period of time. Here on the SuperRails website, you see I also have some fancy animation where the flash disappears either when I click X or when the animation is over. Then again, remember on the very beginning with TurboFrames, each time when we added one element to our search query in the data tables, we were making a request to the server. Well, that's not the best approach because like when you are searching just with one element, like one letter, it will not give you a good search result. So I would add some kind of debouncing activities. So like search after a few seconds since you started typing, or search after a few seconds after you stopped typing. So again, in this case, you don't always need to import a like debouncing library. You can just add a set timeout in a stimulus controller, and it can be enough for your use case. Yeah, so here is an example where I added this debounce controller, and when I start typing, nothing happens, but 500 milliseconds after I stop typing, the request is submitted. Yeah, another example would be resetting a form. So here is a kind of buggy looking behavior where you see I put something into a search form, and when I click refresh the page, you see the form gets like repopulated once again. So I would add this stimulus controller to reset the form. Other examples would be like for select all checkboxes, so or like for adding tabs. So here like tabs. Another example would be for hotkeys. So like click Control K to open search or something else. And really I could keep going on, but I really encourage you to try Hotwire. It's really a very satisfying developer experience, and it fits perfectly well into the mindset of a backend Ruby developer. And feel free to check out the videos. They will help you go through and code along each of the examples I just mentioned. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe you don't need Hotwire. Some people say you don't. You can just use jQuery. Yeah, I'm done. Thanks a lot for being with me, and let's talk later.